The views and opinions expressed during Love and Life with Lana and Dave are those only of the speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or the position of our podcast hosts or affiliates. Any content provided is not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, anyone, or anything. All right, let's do it.
You're listening to Love and Life with Lana and Dave, the podcast where logic is power and you take control. Thank you for tuning in and making the choice to listen in and get ideas for your own love and life. Now, here are your hosts, Lana Williams and David Vaccaro.
All right. We are still in February. Happy Thursday morning. That's when this podcast is going to drop. So today I'm going to review a little bit about identity. I didn't know last week what I was going to be doing, but I decided identity would be really good. There's a couple of reasons for that particular topic or this particular topic to be discussed right around now. We're about to run into an election season, and I think probably everybody is really not looking forward to it for several reasons. So that's one reason to get into it. Another is to tie together some stuff that I discussed in past podcasts. It kind of is adjacent to some of those things, including self-regulation, including attachment theory or attachment styles, including a lot of other things that I've discussed in past podcasts, but just what makes people react the way they do about certain things. So if you have a reaction to something that isn't really directed at you, if you're having a conversation with somebody that is about some topic, let's say we're talking about the grocery store. There are people who, for whatever reason, I'm going to use this as an example because it's kind of a benign example that won't really, just an overview of how you would see this. If you're talking about the produce section of a grocery store and just, hey, listen, I like to do this and I like to do that. And here's what I like to buy. These are the types of things I like. And then just like an offhanded comment about, listen, I don't really buy kiwis because I think kiwis are crazy, and some comment about the fruit itself. You don't have any specific person you're addressing, or you're not giving anybody in the conversation or anywhere else any kind of an insult. You're just talking about the fruit. But for some reason, that particular person you're talking to identifies with that fruit and really, and I know this sounds really silly, but I'm trying to use it as an example, identifies with that fruit in such a way that like they get seriously upset with you. They get really offended, and then they start to attack you. Now, there's different ways that people will attack you back when you attack something that hits their identity. And the identity I'm talking about is like what makes up a person. There's all kinds of different things about identity that makes up different people. Some of it is an outward identity, something that we're striving to be. I would like to be seen as an influencer, or I'd like to be seen as a lawyer, or I would like to be, that's obviously that's an occupation, but you would also like to be seen as somebody that does what a lawyer does, looks how a lawyer looks, and presents themselves as that sort of, there's a billboard in your head that you see of yourself, right? And identity is what you want to project to the world. But there's also hidden identity, and those are things that trip you up or trigger you that you believe about yourself that are not necessarily positive. Let's say, well, let me stop there because of course I'm tangenting, which I normally do. And I don't mean to do that. What I wanted to first get into is like some of the things that people will do when their identity has been threatened, or they feel that their identity has been threatened. One is to debate something to death. They become I always use devil's advocate, but they start to get into, they argue you down to the last detail. Maybe they've been on the debate team. Maybe they do go to law school, whatever the case may be, but they start getting into particulars and technicalities to the point where you start to ask yourself, what is this person's deal? What are they getting? They are really into this. And it's one thing to argue a point in a discussion and say, listen, I understand that you like kiwis, but kiwis have this particular type of ingredient, or kiwis have this particular type of health benefit, or this type of side effect. It's quite another to argue with me for 30 minutes and corner me over kiwis because of something I said that tripped something that bothered you. And when people are tripped and triggered, and if you're on social media anywhere, you're going to see this all day long. You can be debated and somebody will just just debate. Now, eventually, if they go long enough, they'll trip themselves up and start to contradict. That does happen. The next thing that they might do is attack. Just straight out attack you. It can be ad hominem, which is just a form of insults. Listen, I don't care anymore what you have to say. You don't like Kiwis, and I don't like the fact that you don't like Kiwis, so I don't like you, and I think that you're a blah, 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 and a string of insults, which doesn't really have anything to do with the conversation, but somebody that we always, my crew, my team, my squad, we always say when we see ad hominem come out, we know the person that we're talking to has lost interest or doesn't have any more information to insert into the conversation. They have no more ammunition with which to continue their standpoint. They've lost it. So they get frustrated and they just tell you that they think you're a fucking asshole because they have no idea what else to do. There are people on social media that will block or that will stop, in social media, they'll block you and so you can't talk to them anymore or hang up on you on a phone call or in person, get up and walk away or say something like, that's it, I'm done with you. Whatever, have the day you deserve, whatever people like to do, and they walk away. That's kind of another, I would say, emotional or triggered response to something that they heard. And again, we're talking about somebody saying something about a thing or an event or something that has nothing to do with the people in the room. The next thing would be feigning that you don't care, feigning that you're happy about the exchange, laughing at the person, trying to get them upset by acting like it doesn't bother you. And in some cases, it really, if it doesn't, then we wouldn't be talking about this because it wouldn't be something you'd remember or you'd notice or anything like that. But sometimes it's the way that some people like to take the high road is to just act like the thing isn't happening and the person that they're upset by isn't bothering them in the least, or at least trying to come off that way to the other person just to freak them out or to let them know, listen, this thing you're doing isn't bothering me. It didn't land the way you wanted it to land. So sorry. So that you could at least bother the other person a little bit at the end of the exchange. And then there's things like trolling and stalking. And I've always been an analytical person. So to me, even the most nefarious or petulant things that people do, I try to figure out to myself, what makes a person do something like that? Why was somebody you could be bored, you could have a lot of time in your hands. Maybe you don't work. Maybe you're in your mother's basement. That's a big phrase that we like to say, but there's a reason for that. And that there was a point in time where social media was, a towered screened adventure. There was no cell phones, there was no tablets, there were no laptops, right? So people wanted to be on the internet. They had to be sitting in a house, on a PC. That's kind of where that you live in your father's basement came from, or you're sitting in your father's basement or your parents' basement. A lot of kids were young and a lot of kids really did have set up in their basement and lived at home when a lot of the internet stuff began. And so that's kind of where that phrase comes from. But anyway, I digress. Basically, if somebody is triggered by something that you're saying, that's generally the reaction that they'll have. Those last two that I mentioned, which would be trolling. Trolling is like I understand that people that are trolling are trying to get other people upset. I don't care what anybody says about this. And I'm sure that people that troll would say, oh, no, that's not me. I don't do that. Whatever you're trying to tell me I do, I don't. Okay, fine, whatever. And like I always say, it doesn't really matter what we think. What matters is when you go home and you're ready to go to bed and you're looking at yourself in the mirror, you have to be okay with how you present yourself. It doesn't matter to us. We're all just going to go on about our day. But what you present yourself as is what you have to live with. So trolling and stalking's a whole other thing, obviously, but there can be internet stalking that goes on, and somebody that has an exchange with someone else and doesn't like the way it turned out and will online virtually just follow that person around, try to make things difficult for them. If they're frustrated enough, they'll try to find you in person or and whatever. And then we're getting into people that are dangerous and all that. That's obviously stuff that we've talked about before. But in this case, there are people who really will go beyond the normal trolling and into stalking territory with a screen name or somebody they don't necessarily know, but don't like the exchange they had, and they're not done with it. You are, and you're ready to move on, but that person isn't ready to completely finish arguing with you about whatever it is that you both are getting into it about. So identity, again, there are two forms of identity in my opinion. Of course, I don't have a psychological journal on this. I'm just saying from my observation, from my own personal experience, and from people I know and what I've read, there seems to be two parts of your personality. The person that you are projecting out, your representative, right? The person that sees whatever it is that you want them to see about you as you go about the world as you walk around out there. What do they think of you? What is the impression you're trying to give off? And again, then there's also that inner identity. And that's the thing that, again, I was going to go into this before, but I wanted to make sure I said what I had to say. Let's say, I don't know, there's an episode of Sex and the City that I don't know off the top of my head. I'll put it in the notes. I don't know which episode it is. I know every episode by heart, but I can't think which one this is. I believe we're somewhere in season 5 with it. But Miranda she goes to the doctor. They send her to a dentist, and the dentist says, you're a tongue thruster. You have a tongue thrusting syndrome. Now, basically, the cure is for the dentist to give her braces, and that's going to straighten out her teeth, because her teeth are, whether they're moving around or whatever the case it is, this is going to put them back on track and keep them straight, because what she's doing is actually causing her teeth to fall out of line, and it's causing maybe some headaches and some stuff like that. So she decides, all right, well, what the hell? Now she's a lawyer and she's in her 30s, but she decides, all right, I'm going to go ahead and get braces. And the whole episode is based on, she puts the braces on, and like what kind of insecurities come up from like her being in junior high school that she's going through all over again, because she can't believe like just things like going on, not really knowing if guys are going to like want to date her because they think that this whole geek thing that happens. And then like, you know, if she eats broccoli or spinach, is it going to be something that she has to deal with, and all the things that go on when you have braces, right? And I had braces as an adult, so I totally get it. I think I probably was around that age, and I had 2 or 3 years of braces myself, so I get it. But also in the episode, you know, there was this 13-year-old and her friends that were, Samantha was, you know, being the PR rep she is, was putting together some kind of bat mitzvah for a girl who was way too prestigious and had made way too much money and was, you know, way too grown for her age. And she also, I don't know if she did, but one of her friends or two of her friends or whatever had braces, and her looking at them and just some kind of a weird comparison she made to herself to these girls with these braces that she had on. So anyway, the point of the episode is that was an insecurity for her. That's something that she probably didn't even remember until she went and had braces put back on, which of course towards the end of the episode she decides she just assumed just be a tongue thruster and forget about the braces because it was too psychologically traumatizing for her to do. But basically it was something that, let's say that she had never had braces or she'd never gotten braces a second time, something about her childhood and having braces triggered something. So if she was having a conversation with a person and they said something about girls who have braces or something like that, the inner identity she had would be tripped by that. So there are people who will fly off the handle over something that they went through as a kid and they don't talk to anybody about, but it's their secret hidden. It's an identity that maybe they don't want to deal with. Maybe they are trying to forget, or maybe they're trying to change, but way down deep inside before, someplace that nobody knows about, this thing bothers them. It could be, having scoliosis as a kid and some kind of reaction that kids are having to that when you're little, and you grow out of that and you become this completely different person, but there's this part of you that remembers that part of your childhood and it bothers you. So in regular conversation, somebody will say something that reminds you of that period of time in your life, and you take it as if they are insulting you personally. You've got identity crisis, which is like, who am I? Which we've discussed, and I've gotten into in a past couple of episodes of, who am I? Just like there are people out there who don't know who they are, and people who are having identity crisis can be a little off the wall as far as how they react to things. But there's also people who think or have put together very carefully an identity that they want to present, and they're happy with that identity. But underneath that is whoever they used to be. And that person, let's be honest, no matter who we are or who we used to be, is never going to really leave us. It's always something that we're striving to get away from and to change and to make sure nobody's aware of. We can never fool ourselves to say, okay, well, I'm not the person I used to be. There's always a part of us that has that tendency to remember who we used to be. It doesn't mean that anything's wrong with that. I mean, we are who we are, but we also came from where we came from, and we cannot change who we used to be. Like, there's no way to do that. So we're supposed to change and grow and become better. But some people, there's a self-loathing that goes on. And don't get me wrong, I think all of us have a little bit of self-loathing for something that we have went through as a kid or whatever. Even as we get older and know stuff isn't our fault, our 5-year-old selves can't be convinced of that sometimes. So this is why, to me, identity is so emotional and so reactive for people. And when you're in any kind of a conversation and it gets overheated or somebody flies off the handle, that's somebody that's been hit. Their identity, they feel like their identity's been threatened, and it hasn't. So there's a two-part, going on about that. Obviously, as you as somebody that's saying something that trips somebody's insecurity like that, it's not much you can do, but you can recognize that that's what's happening. Okay, well, I know why that's happening. Sometimes if we know why people are doing things that they do, we have a better time handling it. But of course, that person, if they have some self-awareness, would want to stop and say, okay, wait a minute, why am I reacting like this? Nothing about anything that this person's saying is addressing me. So why am I flipping out like this? This is why we go back to the why in our conversation, or in our self-assessment, but also in our conversation. Like, why am I reacting this way? So you can be part of the game. You can be on the board and somebody does something and you react and you become that reaction. But as we discussed in the DBT with Melissa last December, in 3-part episode, there is a way to remove yourself from being in the moment of what's happening and kind of backing up and looking at like the game board and the game pieces. And beyond that, the big picture of everything that's going on, everybody else that's playing the game, what times of the day the game gets played, what table the game gets played on, what location the game is in, and back yourself out of the situation to see like the entire pattern of what's happening and not be down inside the board, reacting to things that you see in the moment, more like, and have that secondary awareness of like, okay, why am I reacting this way? I'm reacting this way, but I think I should check to see why I am. Like, I don't want to react this way to things. So let me do a little more, research about what it is that's causing me to do this thing that I'm doing. If you can get yourself into that kind of mindset, it's going to change a lot of things in your life. Just the justification of I'm mad, so therefore I'm going to do things. What is the long-term outcome of that? What's that going to solve? What is that going to fix? How, as a person who wants to get along in this world and do things, is that going to make your life easier? So there is some diplomacy that helps you in life to get really what you want by not flying off the handle and not being emotionally reactive to things. So this is why, for the most part, the reactions that people have that are highly emotional are usually based in self-identity, and the topics that come up that cause the most craziness and emotional reaction are, of course, dating and things that go on within dating. So when you see two people or you see a group of people discussing dating and you see stuff like, recently I saw something about, let's say, what is it that men are looking for dating, and then women getting all upset about that, men saying, well, I don't want somebody who, is over this much weight, or I don't want somebody who's taller than this. And women who have, I believe, an insecurity towards the thing that this guy is listing. And it has nothing to do with them. He's not saying you personally, I don't want you. He's not pointing them out. He's not saying anything. He's saying, hey, maybe I like blondes. Look, I like blondes and I don't want to talk to brunettes. And if brunettes come into the picture in this discussion and start screaming and yelling at guys about why they only want blondes, that's an emotional reaction, and that's an identity threat. That's why the brunettes are coming in and getting upset about men who only want blondes, because it excludes them, and that's some kind of a weird identity threat to them. Has nothing to do with them personally, but it's enough for some reason to make them feel that their identity is being threatened. Obviously, one of the bigger issues is gender, political party and affiliation, religion, finances. These are things that make people nuts. And so in my group where I've got all of my girls, some of the worst conversations that we've had and we've decided to ban in the group have been because of the absolute ridiculousness that comes out of a conversation that shouldn't be that crazy. But for some reason, religion, when you think about it, people that are religious or not religious, or whatever the case may be, there are people that come from religion and there's been a lot of trauma and abuse and all kinds of stuff that come from the religion that they were born into. So when they move away from that religion, they're highly triggered by seeing things that reminded them of that religion. So that's totally fine. And a lot of our girls know that and will say that, listen, I'm not going to stay in this conversation. I don't want to see this. They know they have the ability to say, yeah, I'm out. I know I can't handle this conversation. I get way too triggered by this. I'll be over there, which to me is it's a mature response. Some people, though, like to stay and dig their heels in and just attack everybody. That to me is an identity threat and somebody that feels like they need to lash out at people that are attacking them personally, even though that's not what's happening. This is how they feel. And we've had girls in the group like that, whether it's religious people that are talking to atheists or religious people that are talking to agnostics. It gets very heated. It goes crazy. Those are the threads for us for conversations that we have where it gets up into the thousands of comments because it's insanity. And we always say, listen, we don't care if we would love for to talk about everything in the world in this group, but we cannot have a conversation about religion in here. You guys just can't keep it together. It just devolves into a dumpster fire. And we've tried 3 or 4 times to let it go and it just doesn't go well. So we've decided, okay, well, you can't, we're going to take it away. None of you kids seem to do this right. and stop attacking each other and talking about each other's whatever, being desensitive or whatever the case may be to what people are trying to explain. And the same thing goes with politics. We cannot do politics. It just doesn't work. And because this election season's coming up, that's why I wanted to bring that up. What do you deeply identify with? And when somebody says something about a specific thing, whether you were be a liberal or you be a conservative or whatever the case may be, when somebody's talking about politics or religion or something that you're really pissed off about. Obviously, if somebody's talking, I don't know, if somebody's, insulting an entire gender, insulting an entire race, insulting an entire culture, or just saying violent things and things that shouldn't be said, things that obviously are hate-based would not be good for anybody to say. I get that. But when somebody's going on and on about, this particular political party and this dumb thing that they do, they're not really talking to you. So you have to stop and think about that. And when you start to get upset about something that somebody's saying, notice that you're doing it. Check yourself. Ooh, I'm not liking what I'm hearing here. If you know that you're triggered by something, there was a point in time when, political affiliations or political decisions, what people thought, what their politics were, just wasn't discussed. I don't, honestly, as somebody who grew up in the 60s and 70s, I really wish it was like that again. It's a personal decision and we should just all shut up about it as far as what we believe in. However, other people's beliefs, of course, I always, go by James Baldwin in the sense that if your belief obliterates my existence, which of course goes back to some of the identity that I'm talking about, I may not be able to agree with that. Agreeing to disagree is one thing, but if your politics obliterates something that I believe in, especially when it comes down to life and things like that, I'm going to be a little bit more or a little bit less lenient or a little bit less agree to disagree. So this is always the time that my dog decides to pull his entire box of toys out and pull one toy out at a time and make a lot of noise. Anyway, so to me, that's identity, right? So just understand that as you're going through this election year or as you're in any kind of conversation that, let's say you're a mom, you have kids, somebody says something about single mothers or somebody says something about moms, for whatever reason, it trips off your insecurity because insecurity is adjacent to identity threat, right? The why is the big question. And I always say why because why is important. Ask yourself why everything is happening. I mean, anything that's happening in your life, if you apply the word why to it, you just kind of see if you can kind of come up with an understanding as to why a thing is happening or a person is saying what they're saying or you are reacting to that person the way you are. It's immensely helpful in trying to understand the dynamics of things and just being part of the machine and reacting off the cuff and not using your more enlightened gray matter to say, you know what? Yeah, I could just flip out and throw something at this person, but let me see if I can elevate myself here and forget about that and understand that this person might be saying something because of some of whatever their thing. Instead of saying, hey, listen, nobody insults me and I'm not going to let anybody see me. That also goes into identity threat where how do you think people see you and how do you not want people to see you? These are all things that are part of that. So again, the hidden and the displayed part of your identity, right? And then even sexual preference. I've seen some seriously heated conversations about sexual preference, what people like, what people don't like. Nightclubs are terrible or strip clubs are terrible or, OnlyFans is terrible. I'm very live and let live. I don't have a problem with what anybody does. As long as it's not illegal, as long as they're not hurting people, as long as there's consent to me is 100%. So, to me, an OnlyFans is a consented thing. It's not something I would do, but it brings in money and there are women who make money doing it. That's their thing. I don't knock that. You know what I mean? I'm not going to say that woman over there, something's wrong with her because she's doing that. It's not for me, but doesn't mean a projection of not what's not for me. Doesn't mean it's not for anybody. I don't like pineapple on pizza. I could go around and make a big stink out of anybody that eats pineapple on pizza because I don't like it, but it doesn't make sense. It's just not my thing. That doesn't mean everybody else has to follow my preference for pizza and what I put on it. You want to put pineapple on your pizza? I think that's great. Knock yourself out. It doesn't hurt me. It doesn't make any difference to me. It doesn't come to my house. It doesn't do anything to my life. If you come to my house with pineapple on pizza and you try to get me to eat it, we're going to have a conversation about that. But whatever you do in your home, right, with your pizza, your pineapple, it doesn't affect me. So I can say, well, I don't like it, but I'm not going to go on and on about what's wrong with you because you eat it, right? That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of stuff like that. Obviously, with politics, it's a little different because people's lives are at stake and laws are involved and things like that. People get a lot more emotional about it. But notice that I just want you to do this from now until the end of the year. And if you can't remember it, write it down in your refrigerator. Every conversation that you have, every conversation that you watch, when you see people getting upset, notice that underneath they feel their identity is being threatened. They feel somebody's going to hurt them. Somebody's going to take something they have. Somebody's going to change their identity and something that they believe in really deeply, like, let's say, religion. When you're born into a specific religion and you come up, let's say you are Christian and you are Catholic or whatever the case may be, you are Catholic your whole life and you believe in God and you go to church every Sunday and all that kind of stuff. And somebody says something about the Catholic religion and somebody else loses it. That's a person whose identity is deeply rooted in religion. And so what you're doing by saying, oh, I don't like the Catholic faith and I this, that, and the other thing, and you bring up priests or whatever the case may be, that's why that person will go nuts. It challenges their identity, right? It invalidates what they believe in, or at least that's how they feel. Two things can be true at the same time. The Catholic Church can have had a lot of indiscretions. However, there are parts of the Catholic Church that are absolutely healthy and fine, and there are people that go to Catholic Church every Sunday or whatever nights they go, Sunday, Wednesday, whatever, and they have a perfectly good life and their entire congregation is good people and there's nothing going on there. That can be true at the same time that other parts of the Catholic Church are completely unhealthy and even to the point where they're covering up and creating a lot of abuse and trauma that may have nothing to do with a Catholic Church in one area where it may have everything to do with the Catholic Church in another area. So I guess people, when you think about it, they just don't react that way. They just look at it like you're talking about everybody and they're going to just flip out on you and they're going to attack you because they don't like what you're saying. And again, like I said, when you see religious conversations, you'll see what I mean. That's what's happening. People are being threatened. They feel like their identity is at stake. Somebody is trying to threaten their identity, insult their identity, somehow or other make it look bad or change it or do something that they feel is going to cause things to be worse for them or for their religion or whatever it is that particular identity is associated with. So that's that. Whataboutism is a logical fallacy. There are logical fallacies. There's several of them. There's a website called logicallyfallacious.com, and it is a list alphabetically of every logical fallacy on earth. And these are things that people use in their conversation. Confirmation bias, red herrings, straw man arguments, all kinds of stuff like that. That's all logical fallacy stuff. So when somebody's talking to you and they're trying to win an argument, it goes off track of the argument. It's going off track of a productive argument, I guess you should say. Whataboutism is like the first thing people will say when you see an argument that's one-sided, or it appears to be. Men are this, women are, I'm using men and women as an example, but it can be anything, religion, it can be politics, where you point out that, let's say, men seem to do this. Whataboutism is the men, typically the men that show up and say, what about women? Women do that. Even some women that will come out and do that. But it's a basically, what about the other side? It's a distraction. It focuses in another direction and takes the point off of the argument that's being made. That's basically what whataboutism is, and it's everywhere. So you'll see a lot of it. You'll see it in news panels. You'll see it in arguments and comments and threads. But what about? As soon as you see that, you know that's whataboutism, and it's basically diluting the argument and taking the focus off of the original point. And that is another form of having your identity be threatened and responding to it. Diversion. There's always a meme. Memes are like, to be honest with you, they're ubiquitous. They're a little bit more everywhere than I'd like them to be at this point. I don't want to get sick of memes, but I think I'm starting to. There'll be a bunch of people under. Now if you have the information that I gave you tonight and you look at the next time you look at a post and a bunch of comments, now you'll see almost in an organized fashion what I'm telling you. So first of all, let me just mention this. Most sites that drop some kind of conversation like, if you had an education, you would this, or, if you, just something, they drop some kind of saying or meme or picture that kind of causes a polarized discussion, and they know that's going to happen. They know people in the comments are going to be at each other's throats over something that they disagree on. And that's honestly, that all of those type of groups that drop memes like that and everything like that, that's what they're doing. They're looking for the viral. They're trying to figure out what's going to cause the most controversy, because online, what did I just hear recently that it's a complaint machine, right? Online is a complaint machine. Most people don't talk about things that they're happy about. Most people complain about things they don't like. And that's really what runs most of social media. It's a bunch of people complaining and getting a bunch of other people to follow their complaints, to agree with their complaints, to add to their misery, right? So think about this. Those kinds of pictures that get shared, there's a reason that they go viral the way they do. The person that drops that meme or picture or whatever has no interest in whether you like it, you agree with it, you disagree with it. They don't care about any of that. All they care about, and I know this because with my group, I put discussion items up. I don't really put like clickbait discussion items. Those things that are being dropped in from different groups or public pages or public groups that are getting shared over and over again. Those are specifically clickbaity type things, right? Where people just can't help themselves but to respond to it. And somebody's definitely going to take them up on what they're saying and tell them they're wrong. And, anything anybody says is going to create an argument because two people are so polar opposite on what it is that they believe that they go back and forth in the comments, right? That's why, to be honest with you, let me, as an aside, that's why a lot of these local news places, first of all, let me tell you, Sinclair, that is a syndicated news organization. So wherever you live, when the local news stuff comes up on Facebook and you say, well, what the hell am I looking at this for? Why? I don't live in Ohio. Why am I seeing a story from Ohio? That's because Sinclair owns the company and Sinclair pushes the stories. And it's easier for Sinclair to push a story to 300 markets. That's the same story from Kansas than it is for each and every news station to push their own stories, with the exception of stuff going on in their own backyard, which you will see. So I just wanted to mention that too. Sinclair look it up, Sinclair Media. I mean, they are a huge company. They were, some of the little local places were sold to Sinclair a while back. A lot of them are scripted, a lot of things they say and do and whatever, at least as far as the conglomerate goes. But that's the thing. So the next thing I was going to say in relation to that is that you can have clickbait under news. There are so many news stories that understand it doesn't matter what somebody's saying to the story. All they care about is that they get the hit, they get the comment. Anytime they put a hit and a comment and a like under something, it creates a virality to the story. So when somebody posts something that's ridiculous and everybody's like, this is ridiculous, the story itself can be ridiculous. The person who posted doesn't care, and the site doesn't care because other people are participating in that post, even if they come there to be mad and make a comment about how pissed off they are that they're looking at this post. That, as far as they're concerned, is participation. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that, so that when you watch social media and the way that it's organized and things that you are looking at, you'll know how it's built and why it is the way it is, right? So the content doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what somebody's saying. What matters is that somebody types, somebody comments, responds, hits like, complains, whatever, does something in order to add to the conversation in a way that makes that post viral. And the more people that talk, the more viral that post gets. And so that's why, for the most part, those, Sinclair stories come down the way they do, or those crazy comments underneath these news stories are the way they are. They don't get removed. And, as much you would think that they would want to clean that up, they don't, because it's just getting them clicks and hits, and people are sharing and getting pissed off, and whatever the case may be. The more that happens, the more that news story gets circulated. So, and they know that. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Yeah, so when it comes down to stuff like this, I just want you to look at your feed, whatever it is. Twitter, Instagram's a little different, although Instagram in the comments can get kind of like that. It's a little less because it's a little more pictures and a little less text, but you can still see sometimes in the comments threads. Twitter is insanity. If I go in there and look at everything on Twitter, it's so convoluted, I can't even follow it anymore. That's how much craziness is going on Twitter. I can't even, if I'm trying to go find a story and read the story in its comments, I've been away from it so long that I'm not even sure how to navigate it anymore. And I always get frustrated and say, forget it. And I'll, use Facebook as an example. That's a place where I haven't gotten into threads. I haven't subscribed to that yet. But for Facebook, you can now see a person. Again, we're all programmed too, by the way, to get those likes and every other thing. So if you'll notice, all of it's emotional. The first person's emotional in the sense that they're trying to get the right response to whatever they posted or shared. Then there's people that disagree. And there's some kind of a weird fashion right now to people that disagree for the sake of disagreeing. But there are people who don't really disagree, but they just feel like being disagreeable because it gets them attention. Don't get me wrong. If you really disagree with something, I think you should totally say something about it. But there are some people who don't really care either way, but they disagree because they're bored. I don't really know. And then after that, all the reactions under that are, when you think about it, to some degree emotional. Even if it's a positive emotional, all of them are emotional. These things, they're very cultivated. So we know what works and what doesn't work. And we've been on social media long enough to know what kind of content works and what doesn't work for getting a reaction that we want. So there are some people who can't get it together and have one like when they do something. I don't really, those people, nobody should really care how many likes they have. They should just post what they need to post, but nobody can do that. Everybody has to be doing it to get a response. So there are people who disagree, whatever the case may be, or somebody will come along and argue with that person that's disagreeing. But the more that somebody responds to what's above them, good or bad, the better that this post does. So instead of getting all caught up in the comments and things that people are saying, if you stand back a little and look at the whole picture, you can kind of sort of see the pattern of controversial post, a few agreements, somebody that says no, blah, 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 and then the person that comes in with the edgy comment where they're disagreeing or they're disregarding some section of the population that makes everybody else feel like they have to protect themselves from it. All of that is emotional identity threat. Those are people that post hit them for some reason. They hit them in a good way, hit them in a bad way. And so now they're identifying with that post and it feels like it's a personal threat or a personal condonement when they see that. And then whoever comments towards that, I actually, trying to remember what the subject was I had recently. I think I mentioned it. I joined an avoidant group and I thought it was about avoidant, dismissive avoidant, fearful avoidant. I thought it was about those people, but it turned out to be a support group for people who dates those people. So it was like we were kind of the enemy in there. But I commented on something. Sometimes it's like just something like, oh, somebody sending me a text in the morning. I said, I don't know what it is. Sometimes I'll say something like where it's almost like I'm trying to be funny, but then somebody will come along that's just like having one of those days where they just feel like I just say something and it just throws them. I call it hit a nerve. Somehow I'll hit a nerve. And somebody came after me with some serious vitriol over something I said that was, my sentences are fairly simple and fairly plain, and there's no hidden meaning to anything I ever say. Ever. I mean, if you're the type of person who reads into everything somebody says, you'll find a million hidden reasons or a million hidden meanings in stuff I say. But when I tell you it ain't there, it ain't there. And I can't help you with that. If you put that there and then try to argue with me about it, I can't do anything about that because that's not something that I said. And so that's what I don't know, this person was having one of those days. And for some reason, the way I said something or the way they took what I said just set them off. And they came after me. And 3 or 4 times I had to say, and there are people that place me in this position where they think I'm this person and I'm trying to get this type of point across and I've had this kind of life. There are people who will create a complete personality on me based on something that I said that they think I meant that isn't there. It's literally invisible. And this person just basically came after me for like hours and I kept saying to them, I can't argue with you about this because this is not what I said. And you're putting stuff into this argument that was never said or never implied. None of this is what's happening. So I'm not going to defend myself to you over something I didn't say. I got no time for that. So if you want to see stuff that's not there, I'm at a loss and I'm just going to not continue the conversation because I did not say any of these things that you're throwing back at me. You don't know where you got these things from. And so I'm not going to, this is like a fairy tale argument that we're having here. And you're just mad at me about something that somehow you think I did based on something you need to like maybe go sign off and deal with yourself. It's just not really related to me. I'm a complete stranger to you, so there's no way you would know anything about my life or why I said what I said or what kind of agenda or point I had or anything like that. And I'm telling you straight out, that's not what I said, nor is that what I meant. Telling me I did, I've got to stop and be done. We're not connecting, on the same page here. So nothing productive is getting done. So you're just this is a struck nerve for you and you're just lashing out and you're just reacting. And I know what to tell you, except that you need to take that wherever it is that you're having the problem. You need to point it in that direction. But that happens where, somebody will tell you that they know all about why you're saying what you're saying, and they'll go into a history. Well, you may have had this happen to you 3 or 4 times, and you think to yourself, what are they talking about? They don't have any idea what I've been through. At any point, 3, 4, 5 times, no times. They don't know what they're talking about. So if you have enough, what I'm calling mindfulness, to step back and say, okay, rather than me get all caught up in the argument and all entangled in the argument that this person's trying to start with me. And I have a meme, as much as memes aggravate me. I have one where somebody's screaming at somebody else going, I demand that you match my level of emotional drama. And the other person's like, no, I'm just not going to do it. I'm upset. I want you to match my level of, I'm screaming and I want you to match my level of screaming. And the other person's just like, yeah, I'm not engaging in that. And if you have enough mindfulness, you can kind of step back and see somebody's doing that. They're just reacting. They're having an emotional panic and they want you to match that panic. And the only reason that I bring this up as something that's specific to me is when I was a kid, this is what my mother did. My mother wanted me to match that level of anger. She wanted me to be frustrated. She wanted to say something to me that she wanted it to affect me in a way that she felt like she was victorious, or she wanted me to be mad and scream back. The more unglued I became, the less in control she saw me, the better she thought she was doing. And my mother and I had many chess games like that, where she wanted to be able to unnerve me, and it would drive her crazy if I didn't do it. And so I spent a whole lot of time learning how to be very calm and centered and not become unnerved when I was being challenged to do that, because I knew just by doing that it would kind of boomerang back to her. And I didn't want to be that way with her, but that was what she wanted. It was a chess game for her. She wanted to see that she could push my buttons and that I could lose it. And if I did, then she'd be like, all right, I know, I got this. I'm in control of the situation. Or the person who cares less. There's some phrase that somebody said once, that person who cares the least is the person who like wins the game. If somebody's trying to win the game with you, obviously the more emotional you become, the like less footing you have in the argument and the more control they feel they gain. I don't know whether they gain it or not, but that's what they think. So, and there are times you can make them think they're in control, and that's still you in control, and that's a whole nother thing. But that's the thing. Can you watch somebody do what they do? And again, back to my episode of why, and if you kind of flip back some episodes, you'll see an episode why and listen to that one. It's a matter of looking at somebody while they're doing something and say, okay, what would motivate this person to have this attitude? What would motivate this person to treat me this way, or scream at me this way, or be having this emotional reaction, or be doing the things that they're doing? Like, what would be the advantage to that? I'm not this person, but can I put myself in their shoes so that I can see why they would want to do whatever it is that they're doing? Because once you can understand that, two things happen. One, you can probably take a different angle as far as like how you respond to it. But you can also, I don't want to say sympathize or empathize, but it makes them less of an antagonist and a little more of a human being to you. So it changes. You don't think of them as an idiot, although sometimes that does happen. It's more like, oh, this person is reacting to this, or this person they think that they're threatened in this way. Okay, get it. Now, you're not going to let them get away with treating you like crap over that, but it's easier if you understand it to like get through the exchange and to understand that they're just being human and they're not doing the right thing in a response to being human, but at least you kind of know where it's coming from. It changes your perspective a lot. There's a phrase that I've probably brought up more than once that says, once you know why everybody does everything, you can't be mad at people anymore. And almost everything that people do is like is a reaction to something that they're trying to protect themselves from, or they're trying to lash back out at somebody over, where they're trying to get, they've been hurt and they're trying to hurt somebody back. Most people that do what they do are doing what they do because of something that they've been through, or something that they're trying to make sure people understand, or whatever, right? So anyway, that's probably going to be the end of it for me. I think that I've pretty much brought up everything I needed to. But yeah, identity. I just want you to, this is your homework assignment I'm giving you, that in all of your tomorrow, or today at work, tomorrow at work, right? You got the weekend coming up. So when you're going out with your friends on the weekend, you're hanging out with people and all that kind of stuff, just keep an eye on everybody's conversation and watch what people do. And when people fly off the handle, think to yourself, okay, well, what is it about their identity that was threatened, especially when they're not being addressed directly, when they get upset about something that has nothing to do with them. Not saying you're ever going to know what it is, because some people have some insecurities that trip off that you're not going to know, because they're not letting anybody know anything about who they used to be or who they are underneath everything or whatever. But you'll notice a pattern, and it's a habit for you also to remember when you see that, to stop and think about it. Oh, here's somebody that's flying off the handle. It makes absolutely no sense. Nobody knows why they're doing it. This must have somehow threatened their identity. They must have thought that this is going to threaten who they were as a person based on something somebody said about something that reminded them of their childhood, of their insecurities, of some hidden thing that they didn't want anybody to know about, or whatever the projected identity is that they're trying to maintain. With that, I will let you go. I'll make sure that I check all my notes in case there's something I didn't say. But no, not really. I think I caught everything. And I'm trying to get Dave back on here. with a podcast or two. So I am working on that. Don't fret. We'll see if we can get that done. And in the meantime, you have a great day. We are rolling into the end of February. Once again, I do not know what's going to happen next week, but hopefully you will have a good weekend and we will talk to you next week with this podcast. Before I go, www.lanaanddave.com. That's our website. All of our platforms are there as far as your streaming services or your listening services. So anywhere you would listen to podcasts, you can get us. Look up Love and Life with Lana and Dave. And all of our social media is there as well. So we have our Facebook, we have our Instagram, and we have our Twitter there, or our X. I'm still calling it Twitter. I don't think anybody else is calling it X either. Don't forget, download, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and then buymeacoffee.com/Lana and Dave. Buy us coffees. We love it. So we have coffees so we can drink our coffees while we talk on our podcast. And like I said, I'm going to drag Dave in and we're going to see if we can get a couple of podcasts out of him because it's been long enough. In the meantime, you guys have a great week. I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Hey, you just listened to Love and Life with Lana and Dave. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please share the podcast, leave us a comment or review, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. We'll see you soon.